Now, I must declare this next segment is actually brought to you by a person and a channel that the Chinese dictatorship says you cannot trust. Its official Global Times newspaper says, I am a bloodthirsty anti-China hawk. And my Sky News colleague, Sharry Markson, it calls a backstage manipulator, spreading lies about this virus actually coming from a Chinese lab. Now, China, as you can tell, is very sensitive about that claim. It has punished Australia after Scott Morrison correctly called a year ago for an independent inquiry into how this virus started. A call that he was criticised for by many at the time. I think he was correct. And one that he repeated yesterday, or Australia did, on his behalf at a meeting of the World Health Organization. You see, we still do not know how this terrible pandemic started. It's extraordinary. We don't know why 3.5 million people have since been killed. How did a coronavirus with unusual features, well adapted to killing humans, suddenly pop up, fully formed, right outside the door of a Chinese lab in Wuhan that was working on exactly this kind of thing? Now, last year, we had so many people saying, that's just a conspiracy theory, it's impossible, lab, man-made. The ABC, China apologists, Trump haters, business people with business links to China, not wanting anyone to blame China.
Western nations are eager to blame someone for their own mistakes. America in particular, they knew about this in mid-January.
Australia-China business lobby. But finally, a lot of experts are now saying, well, actually, it does now look like this virus maybe did escape from that Chinese lab. And China is feeling the heat. The head of that lab in Wuhan, known as the Batwoman, this week helped put out a report insisting that this virus is probably natural, really. It has features of a bat virus, it says, but actually it's closer to what you'd expect if it had then jumped to infect an animal known as the pangolin. But the study still admits it's not clear how the virus then jumped again from pangolins to humans. Well, is this possibly true? I'm joined by Professor Nikolai Petrovsky of Flinders University, who was actually part of a successful international push to get virus experts around the world to take seriously this idea that the virus could be man-made. Professor Petrovsky, thank you again for your time. Do you believe this latest claim from the Wuhan Institute of Virology that it seems this virus went from bats to pangolins to humans?
So, Andrew, this is not a new story. It actually came up very early in the pandemic in February last year, when Chinese researchers actually claimed that they'd found the source of the coronavirus in pangolins. That report actually turned out to be completely incorrect and was a miscommunication between two Chinese teams. And from that point, the pangolins, as everyone's been trying to point a finger at the pangolin, but I think, you know, most virologists now accept it's unlikely this virus came from a pangolin. There is a similarity between the spike proteins in the pangolin and in COVID-19. And in itself, that could be considered highly suspicious because the easiest way to take a pangolin spike protein and get it into a bat virus would be for someone in a lab to actually splice that gene out of the pangolin coronavirus and into the bat coronavirus. And that's exactly the type of research that we do know, and it's public knowledge, was being undertaken by the Wuhan Institute of Virology in recent years. So in a way, they could be implicating themselves by implicating the pangolin. I don't think a pangolin wandered into Wuhan, that just happened to have a chance infection and started that outbreak. So again, yes, pangolins are connected, but in a very unusual way, which many people believe now might be that someone took a piece of a pangolin virus and out of interest stuck that into a bat virus, and out of that emerged COVID-19, which would fit with the possibility of it being a lab leak, not a natural transmission.
Well, that's interesting, and it's maybe a sign of desperation that they're still clinging to that theory and giving another trot round the paddock to see if anyone will, like it even better this year or any better. Now, it seems to me that the weight of opinion has now swung against China on this issue.
Very much. I mean, you know, when we spoke out, because in fact we wandered into this innocently, you know, in February last year when we were trying to develop a vaccine, and we actually have gone on to successfully develop one. But we were also trying to study the virus, and we found this unusual feature. It was exquisitely adapted to infect humans from the very first episodes. And that didn't fit with a normal picture of a pandemic virus. And at that time, you know, when we tried to publish the results of our studies, you know, we were really finding it difficult because the world scientific community had been convinced, and I think now they realize they were tricked into believing this could only be a natural transmission, and anyone who suggested it might possibly be otherwise, because of course no one has the definitive proof to this day, was labelled as a conspiracy theorist. We now know that China was behind that labelling, and really it was China that was driving the scientific community and tricking them into thinking that they were saying something that was scientifically correct when it wasn't. So I think most scientists are waking up to the fact that they were bamboozled last year by people who had very close connections with China, which was pushing this agenda to label anyone that suggested, you know, the possibility even of this being a laboratory leak was somehow a bad scientist or a conspiracy theorist. I think now most people have woken up after a year. That was never the case. We're all just scientists trying to get to the bottom of where did this pandemic come from, which is a very honest, you know, and important question that has to be answered, and we still don't have the answer to this day.
Well, absolutely correct, but I have to add that I thought a lot of scientists were only too willing to be tricked. That's the problem.
Yes.
But what if it is proven that this did indeed escape from the Chinese lab? I'm not sure how it's going to be proven while China has kept the records sealed about the early progress of the virus. What would be the consequences, or what should be the consequences, given that 3.5 million people are dead around the world and economies around the world are devastated?
Yeah, so no one's suggesting that this was in any way a deliberate act. I mean, other than, you know, it may have been researchers who were doing their, you know, research on these viruses for innocent reasons, but an accident happened. What it does identify is that at the moment, research on viruses, including dangerous viruses, is regulated within countries, and really there's no international framework or laws to regulate this type of research globally. And so, for instance, when the United States banned this type of research, it then popped up in China, which didn't have a ban on the same type of research. So what we're now calling for, and I think certainly now the European Union are pushing at the WHO, is we need an international treaty that regulates this type of virus research at a global level, not just at, you know, a level of some countries that outlaw it or regulate it, and other countries that are happy for it to go on without regulation.
Professor Nikolai Petrovsky, thank you so much indeed for your time.
Pleasure.